Every murder is a tragedy, but some leave a terrible taste. A wealthy socialite loves her husband to pieces.
It's one thing to kill someone. It's an entirely different thing to hack them to death.
A perverse fantasy becomes reality.
From accidental deaths to torture to mutilation to this simple act of murder.
And young lovers worship the dark side.
It's sadistic killing for perverted pleasure.
She was very clever and conniving and mean. He said, "You can have everything, just let me go." And she just wasn't going to let that happen.
New York, in the 1970s, is a hotbed for revolutionaries.
We will not stop until the international community recognizes the plight of the Soviet Jews.
And a haven for those fleeing oppression, like Rita Glusman.
And not until my husband is united with our baby son.
Rita came to the United States and very quickly started a campaign to get Yakov out of Russia.
Set the refuseniks free!
Rita had fled the Soviet Ukraine, but her scientist husband Yakov had not been allowed to leave.
She became somewhat of a celebrity in this cause. She was able to get the ear of Congress people.
My 2-year-old son has learned the word Papa.
Rita had an 18-day hunger strike out in front of the United Nations. She would say, "My son knows how to say Papa, but he's never seen him."
After 2 years of dedication, she generates enough international pressure.
The Soviet Union let him go, probably because of the embarrassment. I'm imagining that would be very empowering for Rita. Look what I did. I stood up to the Soviet Union, and I won.
Rita and Yakov aren't the only winners. America is too. Yakov Glusman turns out to be a beautiful mind in the field of microbiology. Over the years, he dedicates himself to solving one of the toughest of medical challenges.
Yakov Glusman perfected a method for cancer research that I believe is helping us to defeat cancer today.
Yakov is celebrated by the medical community and New York society.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Golden Couple of Science.
He received accolades worldwide.
Maybe one day we'll be celebrating a cure for cancer.
Hopefully this will lead to a big fat research grant.
Rita embraces her husband's success and everything the West has to offer.
Everything that the United States could offer as far as consumerism, the finer things in life. She would drive BMW cars. She would travel first class.
But that's not the life Yakov desires.
What do you think?
Do you really need another one?
The only thing he really cared about was he felt he could make a difference in people's lives, and that's all he wanted to do.
We're millionaires, Yakov.
We won't be for long if you keep spending it like that.
But you know.
Rita couldn't stop spending. She spent more than he earned.
His wife's materialism drives Yakov away. He moves out of the family home in New Jersey and into a modest apartment in New York. Rita is losing control.
So we got a mic in the bedroom and the lounge room.
Trying to turn the tables She hires a PI, hoping for useful secrets.
So that she could catch him in infidelity, probably because she figured she would get more in the divorce. She was desperate.
Yakov, I've missed you so much.
I've missed you too, darling.
Rita hits pay dirt. Yakov has met another woman, an Israeli scientist.
Rita really feared that Yakov was going to leave her and go to Israel and start a new life with another woman.
When she confronts Yakov, her fears come true.
He just couldn't take it anymore.
It's over.
He decided he had to leave.
I want a divorce.
She was terrified that she'd be ruined financially.
No.
She didn't want to lose that lifestyle that she had determined that she was entitled to.
For a peaceful divorce, Yakov offers her something he knows she loves: money.
You can have everything. The house, the business. You'll get 1.5 million.
He wanted his laboratory. That's all he needed.
Please sign the papers. Let me go.
He said to Rita, "You can have everything. Just let me go."
But now, for Rita, it's about more than money. It's about her standing in the community. She's about to lose a world-famous scientist to another woman.
I think she regarded her husband as a possession, much like her sports cars, her furs, and her designer clothes. She wasn't going to let him get away.
Rita calls in a favor from her cousin, 40-year-old Vladimir Zelenin.
What?
I need your help.
Of course.
She and Yakov sponsored Vladimir to the United States on a work visa. Now she claims it's in jeopardy.
Would you rather be deported?
She told him if she and Yakov get divorced, then Vladimir was going to have to go back to Russia.
In his mind, as he was of Jewish heritage, going back to a country that oppressed the Jewish people, in his mind, it was a death sentence.
Okay, I'll do it.
Good. We'll do it.
Rita was a very determined woman.
Now what?
We wait.
On the evening of April 6th, 1996, in Pearl River, New York, America is about to lose a star medical researcher.
It was Saturday night, and she knew that Yakov always worked late on Saturday night at the lab.
They had axes, they had hatchets, and they had knives. They also had a hacksaw and scalpel.
Rita Glusman and her cousin, Vladimir Zelenin, have a lot to gain from science's loss.
Immediately upon his entering, Vladimir took an axe and swung it and struck Yakov right across the forehead.
At the same time, his wife Rita gets into action. Killing somebody with an axe is so bloody and up close and personal. It means there's an extraordinary amount of rage, and we know that Rita was a passionate woman.
To avoid divorce, Rita needs Yakov to disappear.
It's one thing to kill someone. It's an entirely different thing to hack them to death. But Rita could do it.
But even in pieces, a body can be identified. Rita has strict instructions.
Did you cut off his nose and lips like I told you?
And don't forget his fingertips, too.
By the time they finished, they had between 66 and 68 pieces of Yakov.
Hurry up!
Such diligence takes time. The sun rises before Vladimir can dispose of the remains in darkness.
Vladimir drops Rita off at her apartment, and his job was to drive back to the river in a remote area and drop all of these black plastic bags into the river.
But this cop comes by, and they notice he's got blood on his clothing. Something's not right with this picture.
What's in the bag, sir?
He was probably the worst partner in crime Rita could have possibly chosen. When the police approached Vladimir, he immediately confessed that he had a body in the bag.
Rita's grand plan falls apart.
Vladimir very quickly expressed remorse in what he had done, and it was genuine remorse.
Although Vladimir spilled murder, for Vladimir Zelenin, it's by the book. In 1997, he pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison. He is released in 2015.
In his mind, this was a death sentence for him. If he did not cooperate with Rita, she knew that, and she exerted that pressure on him.
Without forensic evidence against Rita, a murder charge will be difficult to prove. But thanks to a federal law, Rita is locked away.
This law said it was a crime to cross state lines to injure your spouse. And if that injury resulted in death, a certain penalty was attached.
Rita Glusman is convicted of interstate domestic violence resulting in death. She is sentenced to life in prison, no chance of parole.
If you really think about it, her getting Yakov out of Russia wasn't about love, it was about her. It was about what she wanted. And killing him, again, it was about what she wanted.
This is a crime motivated by anger and greed. Life for Rita was all about Rita.
I'm ready. Are you?
On the surface, this looks like a revenge killing. But it also may be nothing less than a thrill killing.
Married 20-somethings, Amanda and Rex Taylor are like any young couple starting a family in Ellet, Virginia.
Mom, when's dinner?
Soon, baby.
Amanda and Rex met in high school.
Right, let's go.
After that, their lives were just entwined.
Hey, princess.
But beneath the apple pie exterior
Come to daddy.
lies a dark obsession.
They were both interested in horrifically terrible things.
It's fun. Oh my God, that's 15 and counting.
Rex and Amanda spend a lot of time online doing different types of research into serial killers.
Yeah, but he didn't leave any clues in the early days.
People like Charles Manson, Ted Bundy.
Many people are fascinated by serial killers,
Oh my God. He wrote back. He wrote back.
but not many write fan letters.
No, mine.
No, what?
Mine.
Well, read it then. For God's sake, read.
It's one thing to be interested in serial killers. I certainly am.
Hi, Amanda. It's so great to hear from you from the outside world. Oh my God, this is so cool.
But I don't write to them in prison because I want to communicate.
Amanda's interest seems less about why and more about how. She loves graphic horror movies.
She liked them because she really enjoyed the murder scenes.
I really want to know what that feels like.
Any form of death was interesting to her, from accidental deaths to torture to mutilation to this simple act of murder.
But there is trouble in this devil's paradise.
You're kidding.
What?
You took some like an hour ago.
Yeah, they're harmless.
Rex was getting high and staying drunk.
It's the good bit.
It also cut into the family life, raising their children.
Drugs aren't the only problem in the household.
You said we have a photo of our kids?
She found out that Rex had sent a photograph of their son to a serial killer that was in prison.
You have put my kid in danger.
I love our kids.
The serial killer had enjoyed the photograph and did inappropriate things after seeing the photograph, and that was very offensive to Amanda.
Get straight or you'll never see them ever again.
Amanda kicked him out, and he went back and lived with his father.
She won't even let me see the kids.
I'll talk to her.
58-year-old Charles Taylor welcomes his son back to his modest home.
I think it was very difficult for Rex. You're back home with a parent.
That you, Rex?
Hey, Grandpa. How you doing?
Hey, fine.
And your grandfather are also living in the home.
Those beautiful kids with you?
No.
You're away from your wife and you're away from your children.
Instead of cleaning himself up, Rex doubles down.
Rex would take anything and everything he could get his hands on to feel better.
I mean, the guy suffers from depression already. He's on all these medications. He's mixing them with illegal drugs. Something's got to happen.
Happy birthday, baby. Come on, open it up.
His son's birthday should be a day of celebration. But not for Rex.
Rex couldn't deal with the fact that Amanda was no longer with him. His family was taken from him. That drove Rex further and further into depression.
Happy birthday.
Rex committed suicide on his son's birthday, about 4 to 6 months after the separation.
No. No.
Amanda never could deal with the idea that she had any play in what happened to Rex.
Amanda had to blame somebody for that, and it certainly wasn't going to be blaming herself.
And so she focused her anger on Charles Taylor. Amanda blamed Charles for Rex's drug use. Charles Taylor became the person that had caused Rex's death in Amanda's mind.
She starts becoming more obsessed with not only death, but murder.
In Ellet, Virginia, 2015, Amanda Taylor is obsessed with violent crime. It's a passion she shared with her husband until his suicide.
This one.
Now she wants a new partner.
Can you believe how much blood there is? That is so cool.
It is. She actually went on the hunt for somebody. The perfect person to feed all of that lust for violence and blood and gore.
I had my gun and I just popped this guy right in the shoulder.
And she found him.
2 shots, then 1 in the leg.
32-year-old Sean Ball seems amply qualified.
Amanda met Sean through some mutual friends.
I've seen some pretty gruesome stuff.
You tell me.
He had actually claimed to be an ex-Navy SEAL.
I had this knife up to this guy's throat one time, and I just jammed it in there, and it just had blood pouring down his front.
Part of a elite warfighting unit.
Did he die?
I think so.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's all a lie. The guy's a waiter at a restaurant. Never served time in the Navy.
But now Sean's ready to serve Amanda.
Gonna be her, Rex.
And he's signed up for a rough ride.
Amanda went to Rex's gravesite on their shared birthday, March 27th.
Big one.
Come on.
No. Okay.
Between the emotion and the alcohol she was consuming, she became hysterical and out of control.
Oh, wait.
Settle down. Come on.
Amanda. No.
Relax.
She became very distraught at the grave and had this knife, was waving it around, and the people that were with her became concerned that she was either going to hurt herself or perhaps, hurt one of them.
Amanda has someone else in mind to feel her knife.
I'm ready. Are you?
The man she blames for taking her husband.
Amanda blamed Rex's father for Rex's drug addiction and suicide.
I miss him so much.
Charles was somebody that she could justify in her mind. Charles deserves to die.
But he wasn't to blame at all. Amanda was just looking for someone to kill.
This scene is really something that's been playing in her head and something she's watched on the internet, in movies. She knows exactly what she wants to do.
When she started to stab, Sean had a choice, and he chose to help. And he beat Charles in the head with that tire iron.
Amanda stabbed Charles 31 times in the face and neck. I don't think it was so much out of hatred as it was seeing what it felt like to plunge a knife into someone.
Proving this is more than revenge, Amanda goes social.
She holds up that knife with blood and flesh all over it. Charles's body is in the background, and she takes a selfie.
Amanda was very proud of what she did.
Amanda posts this graphic, gory, bloody photograph online. And she says, I stabbed my father-in-law to death because he is responsible for my husband's suicide.
Take a video.
The pair hit the road, but they're not heading home.
So who's next?
Amanda started talking about this murder spree, going ahead and killing multiple people and moving their way across the country.
Sean realizes he's in over his head and tries to knock himself out with sedatives.
Amanda is pissed. She points the gun at his face and she says, I want you to know something.
I only used you for your guns and your car.
and I want you to die. And what does she do next? She shoots him in the face.
Again, Amanda captures her handiwork for social media.
She continued to make postings on social media, so the police were able to follow her location and her motivation and confessions, essentially.
The police know what she's up to, but not exactly where, until the strangest thing.
I'm in Virginia. I'm lost.
She called the police station, told them who she was, and asked for directions. I think she wanted to be caught.
At the other end of the line is Montgomery County Sheriff, Captain Robert New.
I knew what was riding on this call. If we could not get her off the street soon, somebody else's life was going to be taken.
Robert gets Amanda to reveal her location, and she's soon under arrest. Incredibly, her accomplice Sean is still alive.
Upon being arrested, Amanda waived her rights and began talking.
So what was it like?
It's kind of like a roller coaster. You're feeling this anticipation.
She was proud of what she did. She couldn't wait to tell people about it.
You're excited about it, but kind of scared about it too.
She describes it as, it's the first time I felt alive since Rex died. It was such a thrill that it was like riding a roller coaster, she's quoted as saying.
In 2015, Amanda Taylor is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sean Ball recovers and is sentenced to 60 years.
Speaking to her, I felt like I was speaking to evil. She took joy in death, and she loved the attention she got from it.
I think a part of Amanda just couldn't be on her own. With someone, she could be strong. Without someone, she was a nobody.
Amanda Taylor claims vengeance had driven her to murder. In reality, it is for the thrill of the kill.
I asked her, I said, you wanted to be a serial killer? She said, yeah. So how does it feel to fail? And I left.
Amanda got high from killing, so we're all better off that she's in prison for the rest of her life. When two people share the same interest and the interest is bad, there comes a point where talk is no longer enough. They need a real, live victim.
2014, England's historic village of Stratford-upon-Avon.
Hey, Kaylee.
Hey.
I love your hair.
Thanks.
I wish I could do mine like that.
I can show you.
Really?
Yeah.
22-year-old Kaylee Woods is making fast friends with 20-year-old Bethany Hill.
Bethany and Kaylee met at college. They instantly became friends.
My turn.
It wasn't long after they met that Kaylee invited Bethany to come and live with her.
They don't just share a love of hair and makeup.
So, what did you say his name was again?
Jack. Jack Williams.
You're joking.
No, do you know him?
Oh, you are not gonna believe this.
She felt for him.
She adored being in love and also believed that Jack was in love with her.
Two now becomes three. Kaylee starts to worry.
She wasn't entirely comfortable with the fact that Bethany was there.
Set this one out, Bethany.
Kaylee was very insecure about the fact that Jack used to date her friend Bethany.
But Jack only has eyes for his new girlfriend. He moves in with them both and reveals his secret passion to Kaylee.
Jack had a lot of issues with the macabre and Satanism, sexual violence.
The Devil's Triad, known as the Satanic Salute, is always given with the left hand.
Wasn't exactly good boyfriend material. But Kaylee was drawn to him.
They lived in a little weird bubble of an obsession with Satanism.
Come join us, Bethany.
No.
And right in the middle of this was sweet Bethany.
Kaylee doesn't have to worry about Bethany getting between them. But she does have to worry about Jack.
You're acting like a whore.
Jack was very insecure and jealous of Kaylee even speaking with another male.
Put it down! Put it down!
Her boyfriend is losing it.
Bethany!
There was the incident where he threatened Kaylee with the knife.
Open the door!
She managed to barricade herself to protect herself into the bathroom.
I'll kill you! I'll kill you and your family!
Jack spoke about hurting or killing people.
Open the door! Open the door!
Rape, murder, and even mass murder. He was clearly very disturbed.
Jack stabbed the knife through the door multiple times.
Bethany isn't spared either.
Jack didn't regard himself as a friend of Bethany's, and he would express contempt for her and what he regarded as her weaknesses and her inadequacies.
She feels like an outsider in her own home.
She shouldn't have been there.
Bethany had her own mental issues. She suffered from intense depression. She was self-harming.
I don't think anybody could be happy living in that environment.
The girls have had enough. They call the police.
Jack was immediately forced by law to move out of the apartment.
With their nemesis out of the house, the pair mend their friendship and look forward to happier times.
I got pizza.
Until Jack's back. In Stratford-upon-Avon, England.
What are you doing here?
You missed me.
Kaylee Woods has lapsed. She just can't live without boyfriend, Jack Williams.
It's okay. He's changed.
It's a shock for roommate Bethany Hill.
Trust me, it's okay.
Bethany wouldn't be happy about him coming back to the flat.
Bethany was in trouble.
Reminds you of anyone?
Hello, Bethany.
So there was this doll that belonged to Kaylee that she'd had from a very young age.
Not only has Kaylee forgiven Jack, she's plunged back into his dark world of violent thoughts.
When Jack created that fetish doll, he must have had in mind the idea of binding someone and indeed torturing them.
Doll abuse is not uncommon among sex offenders and sex killers. It fuels their violent fantasies until the time will come when the doll isn't enough.
Sensing she's now very much the third wheel,
Hey, Daddy, it's me.
Bethany plans her escape on February 2nd, 2016.
I want to come home.
She called her dad and said, "Come get me. I'm ready to come home."
I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Because it was late, her father said he would come and get her in a few days' time.
That will be too late.
For two people with aberrant fantasies, they need a real, live victim.
What are you doing? Shut up! Get off me!
Tape on.
Bethany was dragged to the bathroom. Her head was smashed against the wall.
The plan was to torture her. You can't torture a dead person.
Put head forward.
Okay.
A knife had been repeatedly drawn across the back of her neck, intended to inflict pain and fear.
After an hour of unspeakable horror, the thrill is over.
The knife was used to cut Bethany's throat. It was horrific.
Once her jugular vein was severed, Bethany would have died in about 10 seconds.
Kaylee said that Jack was sexually aroused during the torture and murder. Torture of another person usually turns on the sadist.
When emotions subside, it's back to reality.
Kaylee and Jack decided they would claim it was suicide.
The next day, Kaylee's ready for the police.
My best friend's dead in my flat.
Kaylee said, "My friend, I think she's dead." She gave the impression that she committed suicide, and then the call ended.
But the couple's horrifying game leaves too much evidence. The victim's wounds look anything but self-inflicted.
A blind detective could have seen that this was no suicide.
Their cover story crumbles immediately.
And when it became clear to Kaylee very quickly that she was the main murder suspect in this, she soon changed her story. It was then she decided to blame Jack.
In 2017, Jack Williams is convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 26 years.
Usually in gruesome twosomes that commit murder, one person is the leader and one person is the follower. But I do believe that Kaylee is a monster.
Kaylee Woods is convicted of the same charge, also receives life with a minimum of 26 years behind bars.
Neither Kaylee nor Jack have ever told the truth about what went on in that flat. The only person who knows the truth is Bethany. And sadly, Bethany isn't here to tell us.
An innocent woman wishing no one harm became a tragic tool for twisted minds. Jack and Kaylee went in search of a thrill and turned to the closest target.
The relationship between Kaylee and Jack is probably the sickest I've ever come across. They fed off each other's twisted desires, and poor Bethany was the innocent victim of this.
Thrill killers come in both genders, all socioeconomic levels. A black heart does not discriminate.
The call comes in just after midnight, when Florida humidity clings to everything and even the cicadas seem to hold their breath. A single ring slicing through the quiet of a neighborhood that has learned, over decades, to mistrust silence. A deputy steps out of a cruiser under a flickering streetlight, palm resting on the door, eyes scanning a modest house that has stood unchanged since the late 90s. And somewhere inside that stillness a long-buried name is about to be spoken out loud for the first time in years. This is how cold cases move, not with sirens, but with whispers, with the sudden realization that something everyone stopped looking at never actually went away. That time does not erase violence. It only buries it shallowly, waiting for a footstep to crack the surface. 27 years earlier, the road into this town was lined with orange groves and cheap motels. The kind of place tourists passed through without stopping. The kind of place residents believed nothing truly terrible could happen because nothing ever seemed to. On a Tuesday morning in late summer, the sun already punishing before 9, a woman failed to show up for work at a marina near the coast. She was reliable, punctual, almost obsessive about routine. And when her supervisor called her home and got no answer, a quiet unease settled in. The first hairline fracture in what had always felt like an unbreakable normal. By noon, the unease had spread, and by dusk, patrol cars were idling outside her house, their engines humming like nervous insects. The front door was unlocked. The television was on. A purse sat on the kitchen counter, keys inside, wallet untouched. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. Just absence, clean and deliberate, like a room exhaled and never inhaled again. Detectives would later describe the scene as too perfect, a phrase that haunts them even now, because crimes are rarely neat unless someone wants them to be. In the backyard, palm fronds rustled in a light breeze, and a neighbor watering his lawn looked over, confused, annoyed, unaware that he was witnessing the opening moments of a mystery that would outlive careers, marriages, entire lives. Her name filled the local papers for a week, printed beneath a smiling photograph taken at a beach years earlier, hair caught mid-laugh, eyes squinting into the sun. Friends spoke of plans, of upcoming birthdays, of a life that had no visible reason to vanish. Police canvassed the area, knocked on doors, collected statements that blurred together into a fog of half-memories and polite shrugs. No one heard anything. No one saw anything. Florida swallowed the details whole, the way it always does, with its endless swamps and back roads and the comforting lie that nature eventually hides all sins. Days turned into weeks. Search teams combed canals. Divers slipped into dark water thick with weeds. Helicopters traced lazy circles overhead. Nothing surfaced. The case slipped from urgent to unresolved, from unresolved to cold, the file growing heavier as hope grew lighter. Detectives reassigned, leads dried up, and the town adjusted to the idea that the story had no ending, only a blank space where certainty should have been. Children grew up hearing her name spoken softly by parents who locked their doors a little earlier than before, who glanced twice at strangers, who learned that safety is often an illusion reinforced by repetition. The cold case sat on a shelf in a county evidence room, cardboard box fading under fluorescent lights, a quiet archive of unanswered questions. Inside were photographs of that living room, the untouched purse, handwritten notes from interviews conducted by men who had since retired or died. There were tips that went nowhere, anonymous calls fueled by rumor, a few suspects briefly scrutinized and then released back into anonymity. Each lead promised something and delivered nothing, leaving behind only the dull ache of almost. Over time, the case became shorthand within the department, a cautionary tale told to rookies about patience, about failure, about the limits of certainty. And yet, the case never truly slept. It lingered in the background, surfacing whenever a similar disappearance made headlines, whenever a new technology promised to illuminate old shadows. DNA databases expanded, forensic methods sharpened, and somewhere in that slow, relentless march forward, the past began to stir. A box was pulled from a shelf one afternoon by a detective too young to remember the original investigation. Someone who saw not history but potential. He flipped through brittle pages, paused over a detail that had been noted and dismissed decades earlier. A long-lost clue hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with fresh eyes and no emotional attachment to take it seriously. It was small, almost laughably so, a fragment of information overshadowed by bigger questions at the time. A receipt, partial license plate, a witness statement deemed unreliable because it didn't fit the prevailing theory. Back then, resources were limited, databases disconnected, and investigators made choices based on instinct and urgency. Now, with time as an unlikely ally, that fragment gained weight. It was entered into a system that didn't exist when the woman vanished, cross-referenced against records that had grown exponentially since the 90s. The result was not a revelation, not a dramatic answer, but a nudge, a subtle shift that changed the angle of the entire investigation. From there, momentum built quietly. Subpoenas were filed. Old addresses were revisited. Names once scribbled in the margins of reports were elevated to the center. Detectives drove familiar roads with unfamiliar purpose, noting how much had changed and how much remained stubbornly the same. The town had grown, sprawled outward, but certain houses still stood, paint faded, driveways cracked, secrets intact. In interviews, people struggled to recall details from so long ago, their memories warped by time, by repetition, by the stories they had told themselves to fill the gaps. Truth became slippery, a thing to be approached carefully, coaxed rather than forced. As the investigation tightened, so did the atmosphere. Word spread, first among law enforcement, then through subtle shifts in behavior that neighbors noticed without understanding. Cars parked outside a house at odd hours. Men in plain clothes asking polite but pointed questions. The hum of speculation returned, sharper this time, fueled by the idea that the past was not as settled as everyone believed. The community felt it in their bones, that low-grade anxiety that comes when buried things threaten to surface, when the comfortable narrative of "it was a long time ago" begins to crack. The night of the arrest did not come with fanfare. There were no cameras, no crowd, no announcement. Just a knock on a door under the same oppressive Florida heat. Even at midnight, the air thick and unmoving. Inside, a life had been built on the assumption that certain questions would never be asked again. Outside, deputies waited with paperwork that represented decades of persistence and doubt. When the door opened, time folded in on itself, the past and present colliding in a moment that felt both inevitable and unreal. News broke the next morning, and the shock rippled outward, headlines screaming of a cold case breakthrough, of a midnight arrest triggered by a clue everyone thought was lost. Names were printed again, this time alongside mugshots and legal language, and the town reeled, struggling to reconcile memory with accusation. People who had waved at the suspect, who had shared small talk at grocery stores, replayed those interactions in their minds, searching for signs they might have missed. Others felt a grim validation, a sense that their long-held suspicions had finally been acknowledged, even if acknowledgement came too late to bring peace. But an arrest is not an ending. It is a punctuation mark, not a conclusion, and as the legal process began to grind forward, old questions resurfaced with renewed intensity. Where was the body? What really happened inside that quiet house? Was this the truth, or just another chapter in a story defined by uncertainty? Evidence was scrutinized, motives debated, timelines reconstructed and deconstructed again. The long-lost clue that had sparked everything proved powerful but imperfect, illuminating some corners while leaving others in shadow. For the family, the breakthrough was a double-edged blade, reopening wounds that had scarred over without ever healing properly. Hope returned, but so did fear, the possibility that answers might still remain just out of reach. For investigators, the case was both vindication and burden, a reminder that persistence can pay off, but also that time erodes clarity in ways no technology can fully restore. And for the community, the cold case ceased to be an abstract legend and became something immediate and unsettling, proof that the past is never truly past in a place where silence has been mistaken for peace. As night fell again over Florida, the cicadas resumed their chorus, indifferent to human drama, and the house at the center of it all sat quiet once more, lights off, windows dark. Somewhere in an evidence room, Files were rearranged, labels updated, the word cold questioned but not yet erased. The story pressed forward, unresolved in its own way, carrying with it the weight of years and the uneasy knowledge that even with an arrest, even with a breakthrough, the truth can remain elusive, hovering just beyond the reach of those desperate to grasp it, leaving behind a lingering chill that no amount of heat can dispel. Morning light exposes what headlines cannot soften. The arrest sits heavy on the town like a bruise that has finally surfaced, dark and undeniable. And by the time coffee shops open, the whispers have already turned into arguments. Some say justice has arrived late but alive. Others insist it's a mistake, a convenient villain pulled from the shadows to satisfy a hunger that has grown ravenous with time. Detectives return to the case file with a different posture now, back straighter, voices lower, aware that every word they write from this point forward will be dissected in courtrooms and kitchens alike. The cold case has heat again, and heat changes everything. They start with the timeline because timelines lie when left unattended. The day she vanished is replayed minute by minute, each action pinned to the wall like an insect under glass. The marina logbooks confirm she never clocked in. A neighbor remembers seeing her car that morning, parked at an odd angle, something he noticed only because it didn't feel right, a detail dismissed years ago as coincidence. Phone records, once too crude to be useful, are now mapped with precision, towers lighting up like constellations on a screen. There is a gap, a stretch of silence where activity should exist, and in that silence, suspicion takes root. The suspect's name, once a footnote, now dominates the narrative. Back then, he lived close enough to know her routines, far enough to avoid immediate scrutiny. He worked irregular hours, a fact that once protected him, offering endless alibis that were never fully tested. Interviews from the 90s paint him as cooperative, forgettable, a man who blended into the background of a town full of men just like him. He answered questions, signed statements, went home. The system moved on. Now, those same statements are reread with a different emphasis, pauses lingering where confidence once was assumed. Investigators knock on doors again, revisiting people who have aged along with the case. Some are eager to talk, relieved to unburden themselves of memories they carried like contraband. Others shut down, resentful that the past has returned to demand explanations. Stories shift subtly, shaped by news reports and the human need to make sense of chaos. Memory becomes a battlefield, unreliable and emotionally charged, forcing detectives to separate what was known then from what is believed now. It is slow, frustrating work, the kind that doesn't make headlines but determines whether a case collapses or survives. The long-lost clue that sparked the arrest grows in importance, examined from every angle. Its origin is traced, its handling scrutinized, its absence from the original prosecution strategy questioned. Why was it overlooked? Who decided it wasn't worth pursuing? The answers are rarely malicious, more often mundane, the product of limited resources and human judgment under pressure. But in the harsh light of a reopened cold case, those old decisions feel heavier, their consequences more severe. The clue connects dots that were once too far apart, but it also exposes the fragility of the bridge built between past and present. Outside the station, the town struggles to breathe normally. News vans line streets that rarely see traffic, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to speak. Neighbors become experts overnight, speculating about motives, reconstructing events with the confidence of hindsight. Social media fills the gaps with theories that range from plausible to grotesque, each shared with the urgency of revelation. The victim's photograph circulates again, her smile stripped of innocence by captions that frame her as a symbol rather than a person. For her family, the attention is both validation and violation, a reminder that their private grief has always belonged to the public imagination. Inside interrogation rooms, the suspect sits beneath fluorescent lights, his face a study in restraint. He denies everything, his voice steady, his eyes fixed on a point just beyond the detective's shoulder. He speaks of routine, of ordinary days, of a life untouched by the disappearance that defined the town. When confronted with inconsistencies, he shrugs them off as memory's failure, a defense that resonates uncomfortably with anyone who has lived long enough to forget. Detectives press, not with accusations, but with silence, allowing the weight of decades to fill the space between questions. Evidence is reprocessed, some of it for the first time. Old samples yield new information, partial answers that complicate as much as they clarify. Forensic experts caution restraint, reminding everyone that science can suggest, not declare. Each result adds a layer to the narrative without sealing it shut. The absence of a body remains the case's most stubborn void, a fact that hovers over every meeting like a storm cloud. Without it, certainty is elusive, and doubt has room to grow. As days turn into weeks, the initial shock dulls into something more corrosive. The town divides along invisible lines, belief hardening into identity. Yard signs appear, some calling for justice, others demanding fairness for the accused. Conversations at diners grow tense, voices dropping when strangers enter. The case becomes a mirror, reflecting fears about safety, about trust, about how well people truly know one another. Florida's sun continues its indifferent rise and fall, bleaching the streets while secrets fester beneath the surface. Investigators feel the pressure mounting. Prosecutors want airtight answers, not possibilities. The media wants progress, a clear arc from mystery to resolution. Families want truth, unfiltered and complete. And the detectives, caught in the middle, understand that reopening a cold case is not about delivering closure, but about confronting uncertainty head-on. They revisit the house where it all began, now renovated, occupied by people with no connection to the past. Standing in the living room, they imagine it as it was, television glowing, purse on the counter, the moment when normality fractured. The air feels thick, as if memory itself has weight. Late one evening, a new witness comes forward, emboldened by the arrest, guilt loosening their tongue. The information is incomplete, fragmented, but it adds texture to the story, hinting at movements and conversations previously unaccounted for. Detectives follow the thread cautiously, aware of how often hope has misled them before. Each step forward risks 2 steps back, and the line between persistence and obsession grows thin. Court dates loom, deadlines tighten, and the cold case, once dormant, now pulses with urgency. Yet beneath the activity lies a persistent unease, a sense that something fundamental is still missing. The long years of silence have distorted the truth, bending it around assumptions and half-remembered facts. The arrest has changed the stakes, but it has not rewritten the past. Somewhere, the answer remains incomplete, a puzzle with pieces worn smooth by time. As another humid night settles over the town, the suspect is led back to a cell, the clank of metal doors echoing down sterile corridors. Outside, the community waits, suspended between relief and dread, unsure whether they are witnessing the beginning of justice or the latest chapter in a story defined by ambiguity. The cold case burns brighter now, but its core remains cold, untouched by certainty, a reminder that even when the past rises to confront the present, it does not always surrender its secrets willingly. The courtroom smells faintly of old wood and recycled air, a space designed for order that now strains to contain decades of disorder. When the suspect is brought in, every movement is measured, every glance scrutinized, as if the truth might slip out in a twitch or a hesitation. The cold case, once a rumor whispered in hallways, now occupies a public stage, its history compressed into motions, objections, and carefully chosen words. Outside, the sun bakes the steps, but inside, time feels suspended, heavy with expectation. Prosecutors begin by anchoring the narrative in certainty where they can find it. They speak of routine, of a woman whose life followed predictable paths until it didn't, of a morning that ended in unexplained absence. They present the long-lost clue as a key finally turned, careful not to oversell its power while emphasizing its improbability. Defense attorneys counter with doubt, with the erosion of memory, with the dangers of resurrecting the past without fresh, undeniable proof. They remind the room that an arrest does not equal truth, that cold cases are fertile ground for mistakes born of desperation. Witnesses take the stand, their voices trembling under the weight of attention. A neighbor recounts that oddly parked car, the detail that lingered like an itch he couldn't scratch for years. His memory wavers under cross-examination, dates blurring, distances shrinking or expanding depending on the question. A former coworker speaks of the victim's habits, her aversion to risk, her plans for the future. The defense listens patiently, then dismantles assumptions piece by piece, suggesting alternative explanations that fit just as neatly into the gaps. Experts follow, armed with charts and jargon that promise clarity but often deliver complexity. Forensic analysts explain how evidence once deemed useless gained relevance through technological advances. They speak cautiously, aware of the fine line between interpretation and speculation. Each assertion is hedged, each conclusion framed as probability rather than fact. Jurors lean forward, trying to grasp the significance, to understand how something so small could carry so much weight. The absence of a body looms large, an unspoken question that colors every testimony. In the gallery, the victim's family sits rigid, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the proceedings. For them, the trial is not an intellectual exercise but a reopening of wounds that never healed properly. Each detail resurrects a moment of hope or despair from years past. The defense's insistence on doubt feels personal, an attack on the reality they have lived with since the day she vanished. Yet even they understand, on some level, that the system demands skepticism, that justice, to mean anything, must withstand it. Outside the courtroom, the town remains divided. Radios crackle with commentary, headlines update in real time, and social media transforms testimony into talking points stripped of nuance. People take sides with the confidence of those far removed from the consequences. Old grudges resurface, alliances form, and the cold case becomes a lens through which broader anxieties are projected. Trust in institutions, in neighbors, in memory itself is debated in coffee shops and parking lots. Back inside, the suspect listens as his past is reconstructed by strangers. Photographs from decades ago flash on screens, a younger face staring back, frozen in time. The prosecution highlights proximity and opportunity, patterns of behavior that only seem obvious in retrospect. The defense emphasizes normalcy, the dangers of coincidence elevated to evidence. Throughout it all, the suspect maintains a careful neutrality, neither outraged nor broken, a demeanor that invites interpretation from every angle. As the days wear on, fatigue sets in. Jurors struggle to keep timelines straight, to remember which detail belonged to which year. The human brain resists holding so much unresolved information, craving resolution even when none is offered. Lawyers sense this and adjust, simplifying narratives, repeating key phrases, shaping the story into something digestible. The cold case resists such treatment, its edges too rough, its center too hollow. A surprise motion interrupts the routine, a challenge to the admissibility of the long-lost clue. Arguments erupt, legal precedents cited, voices rising despite the judge's gavel. The room holds its breath as the decision is made, aware that this ruling could tilt the entire balance. When the judge allows the evidence with limitations, relief and frustration ripple through the opposing sides, neither fully satisfied, both recalibrating strategies on the fly. Late in the afternoon, as shadows stretch across the floor, a witness testifies to something new, a recollection triggered by the trial itself. The detail is minor, almost insignificant on its own, but it suggests a movement, a presence near the house at a time previously unaccounted for. Defense attorneys pounce, questioning reliability, while prosecutors seize on the possibility it opens. The truth seems to hover just beyond reach, tantalizing and infuriating in equal measure. When court adjourns, the town exhales collectively, only to inhale again as the next day looms. The trial has transformed the cold case from a static mystery into a living conflict, one that demands attention and allegiance. Yet, for all the structure and ceremony, the core questions remain stubbornly intact. What happened inside that quiet house? Who bears responsibility? And why, after so many years, does certainty still feel like a stranger? As night falls, the courthouse empties, its lights dimmed, its echoes fading. The suspect is led away, the family retreats into private grief, and the jurors carry the weight of incomplete stories back to their homes. The cold case continues to burn in the public imagination, not as a solved puzzle, but as a reminder that even under the harsh glare of scrutiny, some truths refuse to be pinned down, leaving only tension, doubt, and the unsettling sense that the past is still watching, waiting for its final say. Deliberations begin behind closed doors, but the cold case does not respect walls. It seeps through them, through the thin spaces between reason and intuition, settling into the minds of the jurors like a persistent ache. They sit around a long table scarred by decades of other arguments, folders open, notes scattered, each person carrying a different version of the same story. The judge's instructions echo in their heads, reminders about burden of proof, about doubt that must be reasonable, not imagined. Yet the case itself feels built on doubt, layered and unresolved, daring them to make sense of what time has distorted. They start with what is known or what passes for it. A woman vanished. Her life was orderly, her disappearance abrupt. The scene offered no chaos, only absence. From there, certainty fractures. Some jurors fixate on the long-lost clue, impressed by its belated power, seeing in it a thread that ties the suspect to the moment everything changed. Others are wary, uneasy with evidence that lay dormant for decades, asking why it should suddenly be trusted now. The debate circles, voices rising and falling, each argument sharpening the divide. Outside, the town waits, the trial reduced to speculation and countdowns. News anchors fill airtime with analysis, experts parsing legal nuance for an audience hungry for resolution. Families avoid one another in public spaces, unwilling to risk confrontation or comfort. The victim's photograph remains everywhere, a reminder of the human cost beneath the legal theater. The cold case has become a collective fixation, a test of whether the system can deliver truth when time has taken so much away. Inside the jury room, timelines are reconstructed yet again, arrows drawn, notes rearranged. Someone points out how easily coincidence can masquerade as pattern. Another counters that patterns only reveal themselves when seen in hindsight. They discuss the suspect's demeanor, knowing they shouldn't, knowing how dangerous such judgments can be. Still, they are human, and humanity refuses to be boxed out of the process. The absence of a body returns to the table repeatedly, an unfillable gap that some see as insurmountable and others as irrelevant to guilt. Hours stretch into days. Fatigue dulls tempers and sharpens convictions. One juror admits to dreaming about the case, about unlocked doors and glowing televisions. Another confesses to feeling the weight of the victim's family watching, an unspoken plea that presses on their conscience. The room grows tense, the air stale, as if the building itself resents being a container for such unresolved tension. Every vote taken feels provisional, subject to collapse under renewed scrutiny. Meanwhile, detectives continue to work in parallel, unable to let go even as the trial unfolds. They chase down loose ends exposed by testimony, re-interviewing witnesses whose memories have been stirred by the public reckoning. One lead leads to another, then to nothing, the familiar rhythm of hope and disappointment reasserting itself. The cold case reminds them that the courtroom is only one arena where truth is contested, not necessarily the one where it is found. When the jury finally signals it has reached a decision, the town holds its breath. People crowd around screens, refreshing feeds, waiting for the words that will redefine the story. In the courtroom, the atmosphere tightens, every creak amplified, every cough intrusive. The verdict is read, measured and formal, its language stark against the emotional charge in the room. It lands not as a clean resolution, but as a compromise with uncertainty, a legal answer that does not fully align with emotional truth. Reactions fracture instantly. Some see justice, long delayed but finally delivered. Others see failure, a system grasping at fragments and calling them whole. The victim's family absorbs the outcome in silence, faces inscrutable, grief too old to be theatrical. The suspect reacts minimally, a flicker of something crossing his face before it disappears again. Outside, the town erupts into argument, relief and anger colliding in equal measure. Yet even with a verdict, the cold case refuses to settle. Appeals are promised, doubts persist, and new theories gain traction in the absence of definitive proof. The long-lost clue, once a beacon of hope, becomes a point of contention, its significance argued endlessly by those invested in the outcome. The absence of a body remains a wound that cannot be stitched closed by legal language alone. As days pass, the intensity fades, replaced by a low, simmering unease. Life resumes its routines, but something fundamental has shifted. People are more cautious, more aware of how easily certainty can be manufactured and dismantled. The case enters a new phase, no longer dormant, no longer actively burning, but smoldering, its embers capable of reigniting at any moment. At night, when the town grows quiet again, the cold case lingers in thought and conversation, a story that resists final punctuation. The verdict may have closed a chapter, but the book remains unfinished, its pages marked by questions that outlived the courtroom. Somewhere between what was proven and what was believed, the truth continues to hover, unresolved, reminding everyone that some mysteries, once disturbed, never return to sleep. The verdict does not end the noise, it rearranges it. Conversations that once asked who now argue over how sure, and in that subtle shift the cold case finds new life. Legal language settles onto the town like a thin layer of dust, covering nothing completely, blurring edges without hiding them. People return to work, to errands, to routines that feel slightly less solid than before, as if the ground beneath them has been quietly reclassified as unstable. In the weeks that follow, appeals are filed almost automatically, a procedural reflex in a case this old and this contested. Defense attorneys speak of errors, of evidence stretched too far, of memory elevated above material fact. Prosecutors respond with confidence tempered by caution, aware that every argument will now be reviewed by judges who never smelled the courtroom air or felt the weight of the gallery's gaze. The cold case moves upward through the system, becoming abstracted, reduced to transcripts and citations, its human core flattened into pages. Detectives, however, remain grounded in the messiness of it all. They revisit the file again, not because they are required to, but because they cannot stop. Something still feels incomplete, a dissonance they can't name but can't ignore. The arrest and verdict answered a question of responsibility in the eyes of the law, but not the deeper question of what actually happened in those missing hours. Without a body, without a definitive scene of violence, the narrative remains partially imagined, stitched together from inference and probability. One detective drives the old routes late at night, retracing paths that may or may not matter, the windshield reflecting streetlights like distant stars. He parks near the marina where she was supposed to work that morning, listens to the water lap against the docks, tries to picture her arriving, turning around, disappearing. The place feels ordinary, almost aggressively so, and that ordinariness is unsettling. Crimes that leave no visible scar often leave the deepest ones. New tips arrive as they always do after publicity peaks. Some are earnest, others opportunistic, many incoherent. A man claims to have seen something years ago but can't remember when or where. A woman insists her dreams hold answers. Each tip is logged, evaluated, mostly dismissed, but the process itself becomes a ritual, a way of acknowledging that the story is still open in the public mind. The cold case, once confined to a shelf, now lives everywhere, in inboxes and phone calls and whispered confessions. The victim's family navigates a complicated aftermath. There is relief, yes, but it is tangled with grief and a lingering sense of incompleteness. They are asked to comment, to express closure, a concept that feels foreign and inadequate. How does one close a chapter when the final page is missing? They attend hearings, meet with advocates, try to rebuild a private life from fragments that have been public property for decades. Their loss has been validated, but not resolved. In the town, relationships shift. Neighbors who once shared barbecues now avoid eye contact, divided by opinions hardened into moral positions. Trust erodes subtly, not in dramatic betrayals, but in the quiet recalibration of expectations. People lock doors more carefully, question coincidences more readily. The cold case has altered the town's emotional geography, mapping fear onto familiar spaces. Media attention wanes, as it always does, moving on to fresher tragedies. Yet the case lingers in long-form articles and late-night discussions, dissected by those drawn to unresolved narratives. Podcasts and forums speculate endlessly, weaving new theories from old facts, sometimes illuminating, often distorting. The long-lost clue becomes a symbol, invoked as proof of perseverance or as cautionary tale, depending on who is telling the story. Behind the scenes, forensic labs continue their quiet work. Evidence once considered exhausted is examined again, methods refined, margins pushed. Results trickle in slowly, rarely conclusive, occasionally intriguing. Each finding adds a footnote rather than a headline, reinforcing the sense that truth in cold cases arrives not as revelation, but as accumulation. And still, the absence remains, the body that was never found, the physical anchor that could stabilize the narrative. Years begin to blur together again, though this time with a difference. The case is no longer dormant, but it is no longer urgent either, occupying an uneasy middle ground. Appeals wind through the courts, decisions upheld or remanded, each outcome reigniting debate briefly before it settles back into low-grade tension. The suspect ages in custody, his story unchanged, his denials consistent. Consistency, some argue, is its own kind of evidence. Others see it as the simplest defense against an unknowable past. Late one evening, long after the town has quieted, a file is reopened once more, not by mandate but by instinct. A detective notices a discrepancy so small it had escaped attention before, a detail in an early interview that doesn't align with later statements. It may be nothing. It may be everything. The cold case has taught them humility, the understanding that significance is often disguised as triviality. As the night deepens, Florida's heat presses in, unrelenting, and the streets glow under sodium lights. Somewhere, the unanswered questions gather weight again, pulling at those who have lived with them too long to ignore. The verdict did not end the story. It shifted its center, reminding everyone involved that justice and truth are not always parallel lines. And in that narrow, uncomfortable space between them, the cold case continues to exist, unresolved in spirit if not in statute, a shadow that lengthens rather than fades as time moves forward. Time does what it always does after the noise fades. It stretches, thins, and rearranges priorities until urgency feels like a memory rather than a demand. The cold case settles into this new rhythm, no longer headline material, but never truly forgotten. Court calendars turn, appeals inch forward, and in the background, the quiet work continues, driven less by obligation than by the uncomfortable sense that something essential is still missing. The discrepancy noted in that reopened file refuses to disappear. It's a minor thing, a difference in wording, a shift in emphasis between early and later statements, easy to explain as forgetfulness if you want it to be. But cold cases train investigators to distrust easy explanations. The detective reads the interview transcripts again, imagining the room as it was then, the posture of the witness, the tone of the questions. Context matters, especially when time has stripped it away. The inconsistency suggests not deception outright, but pressure, the kind that nudges truth sideways rather than shattering it. A quiet re-interview is arranged, informal, off the radar of media and legal teams. The witness has aged, life etched into their face in lines and hesitations. At first, they repeat the familiar version, the one they have told for years, the one that has calcified into habit. But as the conversation drifts, as silence stretches, something loosens. A memory surfaces, not as a clear image, but as a sensation, unease, the feeling of having chosen silence over conflict. The admission is halting, wrapped in qualifiers, but it introduces a new variable into an already unstable equation. The detail points toward a location that was searched before, but only superficially. Back then, resources were thin, priorities elsewhere. Now, technology offers a different approach. Ground-penetrating radar is deployed under the guise of routine surveying. Its slow passes over the Earth, translating hidden structures into abstract shapes on a screen. Most of it is noise, natural formations, debris, false positives that raise and dash hopes in equal measure. Then there is one anomaly, faint but persistent, a shape that doesn't belong. The decision to investigate further is not taken lightly. Warrants are secured, procedures followed, expectations carefully managed. Excavation begins under a gray sky that threatens rain, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. Every shovel of dirt feels symbolic, an intrusion into a past that has resisted exposure for decades. Detectives watch closely, aware of how often these moments end in disappointment. They have learned not to celebrate prematurely, not to name what they hope to find. As soil is removed, the anomaly resolves into something mundane, a buried structure, old construction debris, the remains of a long-forgotten project. Relief and frustration collide, a familiar emotional whiplash. The cold case tightens its grip, reminding everyone that false hope is one of its cruelest tools. Yet even in disappointment, the process yields information, mapping the terrain of what is not, narrowing the field by inches. The witness, now unburdened by secrecy, continues to talk. They describe a vehicle seen at an unusual hour, a detail omitted before out of fear or loyalty or self-preservation. The description is vague, but combined with records and timelines, it suggests movement where there should have been none. Old traffic data, once discarded as irrelevant, is re-examined. Patterns emerge, faint and incomplete, but enough to suggest the town's stillness was not as absolute as it appeared. Legal teams become aware of the renewed activity, tension rising behind the scenes. The defense frames it as desperation, the prosecution as diligence. Both are partly right. Cold cases blur the line between persistence and obsession, and everyone involved knows how easily one can masquerade as the other. Motions are filed, hearings scheduled, the system reacting to the possibility that the story is not finished after all. For the family, the resurgence is exhausting. Each new development reopens wounds, forces them to recalibrate hope and dread. They have learned to protect themselves emotionally, to wait for confirmation before allowing feeling to surface. Still, the idea that something tangible might finally emerge, that the absence might be filled, exerts a powerful pull. Closure remains an elusive promise, dangled just out of reach. The suspect's world narrows further, his routine constrained by custody and court dates. He hears rumors of renewed searches, of witnesses talking again, and his composure begins to show strain. In recorded calls, his language shifts subtly, irritation creeping in where calm once prevailed. Analysts note the change, cautious not to overinterpret, but attentive to patterns that echo earlier inconsistencies. As summer deepens, Florida's heat becomes oppressive, mirroring the pressure building around the case. The town feels it too, a low hum of anticipation that resurfaces whenever an unmarked vehicle appears or caution tape flutters briefly in the distance. People who thought they had made peace with uncertainty find themselves unsettled again, reminded that unresolved stories have a way of reasserting themselves when least expected. The cold case, long defined by absence, now pulses with activity, not enough to claim resolution, but enough to destabilize what had begun to feel fixed. Each new fragment reshapes the narrative slightly, like a kaleidoscope turning, familiar pieces forming unfamiliar patterns. And in that shifting picture, one truth becomes harder to ignore. Time did not bury this case. It preserved it, waiting patiently for the moment when the ground would finally begin to give. Autumn arrives quietly, not with relief from the heat but with a change in texture. The air slightly thinner, the nights marginally longer, and with it a sense that the case has entered another phase, one defined less by spectacle and more by pressure. The renewed investigation does not announce itself. It advances sideways through paperwork and late-night calls, through databases cross-checked again and again until patterns begin to whisper instead of shout. The cold case has learned patience from the people chasing it, and now it tests that patience relentlessly. The vehicle description becomes a focal point, imperfect but persistent. It does not match the suspect's known car at the time, at least not on paper. That discrepancy sparks a deeper dive into records that predate digital convenience. Handwritten logs and archived insurance documents pulled from storage rooms that smell like dust and neglect. Ownership histories blur, transfers overlap, and gaps appear where certainty should live. Investigators trace one such gap to a short window years ago, a span of weeks during which a vehicle changed hands quietly, informally, leaving behind only partial traces. It is not proof, but it is friction, and friction generates heat. A former acquaintance of the suspect is located after weeks of searching, a man who has spent years avoiding attention, moving from job to job, town to town. When detectives finally sit across from him, the conversation starts cautiously, circling around shared history and mutual acquaintances. He insists he knows nothing, that he barely remembers those years. But memory has a way of unraveling under sustained focus. A detail slips, then another, contradiction stacking like unstable bricks. He grows defensive, then tired, and in that fatigue something real surfaces. He speaks of a favor asked, small at the time, insignificant enough to agree to without question. Borrowing a vehicle, helping move something heavy late at night. He cannot say what it was, only that it smelled wrong, that the urgency felt unnatural. He insists he never saw her, never knew what it was connected to, but his voice lacks conviction even to his own ears. Detectives do not accuse. They listen. Silence does the rest. The statement is recorded, parsed, weighed. Lawyers will later argue its reliability, its motivations, its timing. For now, it changes the shape of the case, adding dimension where there was once only speculation. The cold case tightens, not closing, but focusing, like a lens adjusted just enough to bring a blurred outline into partial clarity. Search efforts resume, more targeted this time. Not broad sweeps, but precise movements guided by inference and geography. Canals are revisited with sonar calibrated to modern standards. Wooded lots long since swallowed by development are examined before construction crews arrive, racing the slow erasure of the past by progress. Each location carries its own emotional weight, hope tempered by experience. Investigators have learned to expect disappointment as the default outcome. The media catches wind again. Stories framed carefully, cautiously, language softened to avoid promising what cannot be delivered. Still, the town feels the shift. Conversations restart, this time quieter, more guarded. People who once declared certainty now hedge, realizing how easily narratives can collapse under new information. The cold case has become a lesson in humility, reminding everyone how fragile conclusions can be when built on incomplete foundations. Inside correctional walls, the suspect feels the pressure acutely. His legal team grows more active, filing motions, requesting hearings, attempting to control the narrative before it escapes them. In private moments, his composure fractures. Recorded calls reveal irritation turning to anger, anger to anxiety. He asks questions he never asked before about evidence, about witnesses, about timelines. Each question suggests awareness, not of guilt necessarily, but of vulnerability. For the family, the renewed momentum is a cruel echo of the early days, when every phone call carried potential answers. They steel themselves against expectation, reminding one another how many times hope has been misplaced. Yet something feels different now, heavier, closer. They sense movement not just in the case, but in the people handling it, a quiet determination that refuses to let the story recede again. One evening, as storms roll in from the coast, a search team pauses at a remote stretch of land marked by overgrowth and standing water. The area was briefly examined decades earlier, dismissed due to flooding and limited access. Now, with better equipment and a clearer hypothesis, they return. Rain falls steadily, turning soil to mud, complicating the work. A detector emits an irregular signal, not strong, but distinct. The team marks the spot, cautious, aware of how often such moments dissolve into nothing. Excavation begins at first light. Layers of earth are peeled back slowly, deliberately. The work is painstaking, silent except for the sounds of tools and distant thunder. Then something changes in the texture of the soil, a subtle difference that experienced hands recognize instinctively. They stop. Procedures kick in. Photographs are taken. The moment stretches, suspended between dread and anticipation. What emerges is not a body, not the answer everyone has waited for, but an object, degraded by time, unmistakably out of place. It is catalogued, sealed, removed with care. Its significance is not immediately clear, but its presence is enough to shift the ground beneath the case once more. The cold case exhales, as if acknowledging that something has finally been disturbed. As night falls again, the town senses it without knowing why. Unmarked vehicles move through streets, lights off, purpose sharp. Somewhere, paperwork is updated, strategies revised, expectations recalibrated. The case is no longer circling. It is advancing, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably forward, carrying with it the weight of years and the quiet understanding that whatever comes next will not bring simple answers, only deeper truths that may be harder to live with than the mystery itself. The object changes everything without explaining anything, and that is how cold cases tighten their grip. It sits now in a sterile lab, stripped of context, reduced to measurements and material analysis, while outside the storm that soaked the excavation site moves on, leaving behind churned earth and unanswered anticipation. Investigators know better than to name it too quickly, to declare meaning where only possibility exists. Still, the weight of it follows them, a silent companion in every conversation that comes after. Forensic technicians work methodically, documenting corrosion, tracing origins, comparing it against inventories that span decades. The object does not match anything previously cataloged, not directly, but it resonates, aligning with gaps in earlier reports, with things noted and forgotten. Its age places it squarely in the window of disappearance, a coincidence that feels deliberate even if it isn't. Science offers parameters, not conclusions, and the waiting becomes its own form of tension. The renewed activity triggers a legal response almost immediately. Motions fly back and forth, arguments sharpened by the possibility that the foundation of the verdict could shift. Prosecutors tread carefully, aware that introducing new elements post-conviction invites scrutiny as intense as it is necessary. Defense attorneys frame the discovery as irrelevant at best, prejudicial at worst, emphasizing the dangers of confirmation bias in long-running investigations. The cold case becomes a chessboard, each move calculated, each piece carrying disproportionate weight. Detectives return to interviews armed with new focus. The former acquaintance who spoke of the late-night favor is questioned again, this time with timelines refined, details cross-checked. His story holds, but strain shows at the edges, the effort of maintaining consistency wearing him down. He admits to more than before, small clarifications that accumulate into something larger, a clearer picture of urgency, of fear, of decisions made quickly and regretted slowly. He does not confess to a crime, but his proximity to one becomes harder to deny. The suspect's responses grow increasingly volatile. Where once he deflected, now he reacts. In monitored conversations, he rails against investigators, against bad luck, against the past itself. He insists on innocence while simultaneously acknowledging mistakes, a contradiction that does not go unnoticed. Analysts mark shifts in language, changes in pronoun use, subtle distancing from events he once spoke of abstractly. None of it is proof, but cold cases are built on patterns, not confessions. The town feels the pressure building again. Construction near the search site is halted quietly, permits delayed without explanation. Rumors spread faster than facts, and the object becomes a blank canvas for speculation. Some say it belonged to her. Others say it implicates someone else entirely. The truth remains sealed behind lab doors, indifferent to public imagination. Yet the collective sense of waiting returns, heavier now because it carries precedent, the memory of hope raised and crushed before. For the family, the discovery is both gift and burden. They are informed privately, details limited, expectations managed. They cling to the idea that something tangible has finally emerged, that the story is no longer defined solely by absence. At the same time, they brace for disappointment, aware of how easily meaning can evaporate under scrutiny. Grief, long familiar, adapts to this new shape, accommodating possibility without trusting it. Days pass, results trickle in. The object's material composition narrows its origin, linking it to a category of items produced in limited quantities during the period in question. Purchase records are incomplete, but not non-existent. A name surfaces, then another, a web of transactions that feels both promising and overwhelming. Investigators divide tasks, some chasing paper trails, others returning to the field, retracing routes suggested by the evolving narrative. One lead points toward a secondary location, a place mentioned only once in early reports, dismissed as irrelevant because nothing obvious connected it to the victim. Now, reframed by new information, it demands attention. The site is unremarkable, a stretch of land that has changed hands and purposes over the years, its past buried beneath layers of mundane use. Gaining access requires patience, negotiation, and the careful navigation of legal boundaries. Cold cases do not reward haste. When the search begins, it is quieter than before, stripped of expectation. Investigators have learned restraint. They document, measure, scan, moving slowly through an environment that resists revelation. The work is interrupted by false alarms, by signals that resolve into debris or natural formations. Each disappointment reinforces caution, yet persistence carries them forward, step by deliberate step. As night falls, they pause, marking points of interest, planning the next phase. The object recovered earlier remains the anchor, its significance still unfolding. It has not solved the case, but it has destabilized it, pulling threads that were once thought secure. The cold case responds as it always does to pressure, not by yielding answers, but by reshaping questions. Back in town, the suspect lies awake, the weight of uncertainty pressing in. He senses the shift, the tightening net, even without knowing its exact shape. The past, long managed through denial and distance, feels suddenly closer, louder. He cannot outrun it now. None of them can. The cold case moves forward into deeper water, guided by fragments and instincts honed over years of failure and persistence. Whatever the object ultimately proves to be, it has already accomplished one thing. It has broken the illusion that this story was finished. And once that illusion is gone, there is no returning to the comfort of unanswered questions. There is only the long, uneasy march toward whatever truth remains, waiting beneath the surface, patient as the years that have protected it. The secondary location resists interpretation, and that resistance becomes its own form of information. It is not dramatic, not isolated, not the kind of place people imagine when they think of secrets buried on purpose. It is ordinary ground, layered with the residue of everyday use, a reminder that disappearance does not always require remoteness, only opportunity. Investigators move through it with a new attentiveness, aware that meaning here will be subtle, earned through patience rather than discovery. Soil samples are taken, catalogued, compared. Patterns are sought not in what stands out, but in what feels inconsistent with the land's history. A depression where there shouldn't be one. Fill dirt that doesn't match surrounding layers. Small anomalies that suggest human interference without declaring its purpose. Each finding is logged, debated, weighed against the risk of reading intention into coincidence. Cold cases punish imagination when it outruns evidence. Back in the lab, results from the object deepen rather than resolve uncertainty. Trace elements link it indirectly to a supplier that serviced multiple businesses in the region during the 90s. Purchase logs reveal overlapping names, familiar ones, including an entity connected, however loosely, to the suspect's circle. The connection is circumstantial, but it narrows the universe of explanation. The object no longer floats freely in the narrative. It has gravity now. Investigators return to financial records, a task once considered futile. Transactions long buried in microfilm and handwritten ledgers are revisited with renewed purpose. Patterns emerge slowly, inconsistently, the way truth often does in old cases. Cash withdrawals clustered around key dates. Equipment rentals that don't align with stated needs. None of it proves violence, but it sketches a rhythm of activity that contradicts claims of normalcy. The former acquaintance, now deeply entangled, is confronted with these findings. He grows quieter, less defensive, his certainty eroding under the weight of accumulated detail. He admits to more context, a sense of panic in the suspect that night, an urgency that felt disproportionate to the task described. He insists again that he did not know what he was helping with, but his account edges closer to awareness, to the uncomfortable space between ignorance and complicity. Legal strategies adjust in response. Prosecutors consider supplemental filings, cautious about reopening wounds that might compromise what has already been secured. Defense attorneys prepare counternarratives, emphasizing the speculative nature of the new material. The case teeters between expansion and fracture, each side aware that pushing too hard could undo years of work. Cold cases are delicate at this stage, their revived momentum fragile, vulnerable to overreach. The town senses the escalation even without details. There is a change in posture among officials, a seriousness that cannot be faked. Conversations resume in lowered tones, speculation tempered by fatigue. People have learned that certainty is temporary, that answers, when they come, rarely arrive clean. The case has taught them restraint, even as it draws them back in. For the family, the secondary location becomes a symbol, not of hope exactly, but of movement. It represents the idea that the story is still being written, that absence might eventually give way to something tangible. They attend briefings, listen carefully, ask fewer questions than before. Experience has taught them the cost of anticipation. They hold space for possibility without surrendering to it. In custody, the suspect's behavior shifts again. He requests meetings with counsel more frequently, asks pointed questions about evidence that has not been disclosed publicly. The pattern is noted, not because it proves knowledge, but because it suggests awareness of pressure. His earlier insistence on distance from the events of that time begins to soften, replaced by a narrative of chaos and confusion, of mistakes made without malicious intent. The reframing is subtle, strategic, and telling. Search efforts at the secondary location intensify. New equipment is brought in, specialists consulted. The work is slow, methodical, deliberately unremarkable. Investigators understand now that the case will not be solved by a single dramatic find, but by accumulation, by narrowing the field until only one explanation remains plausible. The land yields little at first, then something small, indistinct, enough to warrant further attention without declaring significance. That something is treated with the same care as the first object, documented, preserved, analyzed. This context matters more than its form, its placement more than its appearance. It suggests activity, not necessarily outcome, a step in a process rather than its conclusion. The cold case tightens again, the circle of uncertainty shrinking by degrees. As weeks pass, the narrative becomes more complex, not simpler. New questions arise alongside tentative answers, each clarification revealing another gap. Investigators embrace this complexity, understanding that resolution in cold cases often feels messier than mystery. The goal shifts subtly from solving to understanding, from closure to truth, however incomplete. Late one night, after another long day of analysis and interviews, a detective revisits the original scene in his mind. The unlocked door, the television's glow, the purse left behind. With everything now known or partially known, the image reframes itself. The absence feels less clean, less deliberate, more interrupted. Something began and did not finish the way it was intended. That realization settles heavily, suggesting not just what happened, but how quickly it may have spiraled. The cold case moves forward, burdened by its own history, sharpened by new information, unwilling to yield easily. It has passed the point of speculation and entered the realm of consequence. Whatever remains hidden is no longer protected by time alone. The past is narrowing, the margins closing in, and somewhere within that tightening space, the truth waits, diminished by years, but not erased, preparing to surface whether anyone is ready to face it or not. The end does not arrive as a revelation, comes as a narrowing. By the time the final hearings are scheduled, the cold case has shed its early drama and settled into something heavier, more deliberate, a gravity that pulls every remaining fragment toward the same conclusion without ever allowing them to lock perfectly into place. Years of noise have distilled into a small number of facts, stubborn and incomplete, circling one another like wary animals. The courtrooms are quieter now. There are fewer cameras, fewer voices competing for attention. What remains is procedure, argument refined to its sharpest edges, and the understanding that whatever happens next will not feel like victory. Prosecutors present the accumulated weight of the new findings, careful to frame them not as a reinvention of the case, but as its completion. They speak of patterns that only emerge over time, of how absence itself can become evidence when paired with action. The defense responds with restraint, no longer dismissive, but cautious, emphasizing limits, warning against conclusions built from inference rather than certainty. Judges listen, expressionless, their questions precise and unforgiving. They are less interested in narrative than in thresholds, in whether the law can accommodate a truth that refuses to be absolute. Rulings come slowly, deliberately, each one shaping the final contours of the case without resolving its emotional core. Motions are granted in part, denied in part, the outcome neither total vindication nor collapse. The cold case even here resists clean outcomes. Behind the legal language, investigators watch with a mixture of relief and fatigue. They have pushed the story as far as it will go without inventing what does not exist. The secondary location, the objects, the witnesses who finally spoke, all of it has tightened the frame, clarified intent, suggested sequence. Yet the missing piece remains missing. No body emerges. No final act presents itself neatly for the record. The truth, such as it is, exists in negative space. The suspect stands again before the court, older now, his posture less rigid, the defiance worn thin by years of pressure. When he speaks, it is measured, careful, a statement crafted to acknowledge chaos without accepting culpability. He admits to fear, to poor decisions, to moments he wishes he could erase. He stops short of confession, always. The line holds. Some hear guilt in his words. Others hear survival. The ambiguity endures. For the family, this phase is the hardest to endure. They have lived with uncertainty for so long that its presence feels familiar, almost structured. Now they are asked to accept a form of resolution that does not deliver what was lost. They listen as judges speak of legal sufficiency, of finality, of what the system can and cannot provide. They nod, they breathe, they absorb language that feels both necessary and hollow. Closure, they understand now, is not something the law can grant. When the final decision is read, it lands with a muted weight. The case is affirmed in part, constrained in others, the outcome a reflection of compromise rather than triumph. It satisfies the requirements of the system while leaving emotional debts unpaid. Outside, there is no eruption, no collective release. Just a subdued acknowledgement that this chapter, at least, has ended. The town reacts quietly. There are no rallies, no confrontations, only conversations that trail off, glances exchanged with unspoken understanding. People have grown tired of certainty. They have learned that answers, when delayed long enough, lose their power to heal. The cold case has changed them, not by teaching fear, but by eroding the belief that truth always arrives whole. Investigators return files to storage, this time with annotations that reflect everything learned along the way. The boxes are heavier now, fuller, but not complete. They know these shelves well, know how many cases rest here without endings. This one will not haunt them in the same way anymore. It has given up what it will give. The rest belongs to time. At the secondary location, the land is reclaimed by routine. Construction resumes. Grass grows. Markers are removed. To anyone passing by, it is just another piece of Florida ground, indistinguishable from the rest. Only those who worked there know what questions were asked beneath its surface, what hopes briefly anchored themselves to its soil before letting go. The suspect is led away for the last time. His future defined by rulings that feel both final and provisional. He does not look back. Perhaps he knows there is nothing left to say, or perhaps he understands that the silence will always speak louder than he can. His story, like the case itself, will be debated long after he stops telling it. For the family, life resumes in small, deliberate steps. They gather photographs, return some to boxes, leave others out. They speak her name without lowering their voices now. They have learned that memory does not need answers to survive. It needs acknowledgement, space, the permission to exist without resolution. In that, they find a fragile kind of peace. Years from now, new detectives will open the file, not because they expect to solve it, but because cold cases teach lessons no manual can capture. They will read about the long-lost clue, the midnight arrest, the objects that shifted everything without explaining enough. They will learn how persistence can coexist with humility, how truth can be approached without being fully claimed. The story will live on in fragments, in documentaries, in late-night conversations, in the collective memory of a town that learned how close the past can be, not as a solved mystery, but as a warning and a reminder that absence leaves marks, that time does not erase, it waits, and that some cold cases do not end with answers, but with understanding, uneasy and incomplete, lingering like humidity in the Florida air, long after the last words have been spoken and the lights have gone out. The story does not stop simply because the court calendar runs out of dates. It keeps moving in quieter ways, slipping into margins, resurfacing where no one expects it. Long after the final ruling, after the last microphone is packed away, the Florida cold case continues to breathe through the lives it touched, an undercurrent that never fully recedes. A retired detective wakes before dawn, the habit impossible to break, and for a moment he forgets that the case is no longer active. The reflex is still there, the mental checklist, the instinct to review timelines while the coffee brews. He remembers the smell of the evidence room, the way the air felt heavier every time that file was opened, as if the questions inside it were drawing oxygen from the room. He tells himself he did everything he could. The thought comforts him only briefly. In the archives, the file rests among thousands of others, but it is requested more often than most. Students of criminal justice ask for it. Journalists revisiting old leads ask for it. Detectives from other jurisdictions ask for it, curious about how a single clue could shift an entire narrative without resolving it. Each time, the box is opened, its contents laid out carefully, reverently, as if the paper itself might flinch under careless hands. There is something about the cold case that defies categorization. It is not a failure in the traditional sense. It is not a success either. It occupies a liminal space, a reminder that the justice system is designed to act on what can be proven, not on what feels true. That distinction becomes clearer with distance, sharper, more uncomfortable. People talk about it less as a mystery now and more as a lesson. In the town, time smooths over the sharpest edges. New families move in, unaware of the story woven into the streets they walk. A cafe opens where an old hardware store once stood. Children ride bikes past places that once swarmed with patrol cars and forensic vans. Life does what it always does, continues, and yet, every so often, someone pauses mid-conversation when a name is mentioned, or a date, or a detail that still carries weight. The family learns to recognize these moments. They have become experts at reading the room, at sensing when curiosity shifts into discomfort. They answer questions when they can. They deflect when they cannot. They understand now that no one outside their circle will ever carry the full burden of not knowing. That weight belongs to them alone, reshaped over time but never gone. On anniversaries, reporters still call. The questions are gentler now, less urgent, but no less invasive. What do you think really happened? Do you believe justice was served? Is there anything you want people to remember? The answers come slowly, chosen with care. Justice, they say, is complicated. Memory, they say, is fragile. What they want remembered is not the mystery, but the person at its center, the life interrupted, the absence that changed everything. Some nights, the town seems quieter than it should be. The air hangs thick, the kind of Florida night that presses in on the senses. In those moments, the case feels close again, as if it never left, as if the distance of years collapses into a single breath. People lie awake, thoughts drifting to unanswered questions they have long since stopped asking out loud. There are rumors, of course. There are always rumors. Someone claims to have heard a confession in a bar. Someone else swears they saw something years ago and only now understands what it meant. These fragments surface periodically, triggering brief flurries of attention before dissolving under scrutiny. Investigators review them dutifully, professionally, knowing most will lead nowhere. Still, each one is considered. The door, though heavy, is never fully closed. The suspect, now defined by a past he cannot outrun, lives in the shadow of the case. Wherever he goes, it follows, whispered, implied, etched into public record. He insists on his version of events to those who will listen. He avoids the subject entirely with others. His life becomes smaller, more controlled, shaped by the knowledge that he will always be adjacent to a question larger than himself. For him, the cold case is a sentence without a term limit. Even if the law has spoken, the doubt remains, persistent, corrosive. He learns what it means to exist in a space where certainty is impossible, where every interaction carries the possibility of recognition, judgment, or suspicion. The midnight arrest that once promised resolution has instead become a permanent marker, a dividing line between before and after. Years pass. Technology evolves. Techniques once considered cutting-edge become standard, then obsolete. Somewhere in a lab, a scientist develops a method that could, in theory, extract meaning from evidence long thought exhausted. The idea flickers briefly among those who remember the case. Could this be it? Could the missing piece finally emerge? But the practical obstacles remain. Samples degrade. Records age. Time, relentless and indifferent, has already taken its toll. Still, hope has a way of resurfacing. It does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, in conversations between colleagues, in speculative articles, in late-night messages exchanged between investigators who never quite let go. The cold case has taught them that persistence is not always about resolution. Sometimes it is about refusal, a refusal to forget, a refusal to declare the unknown irrelevant. In classrooms, professors use the case to illustrate the limits of narrative. They point out how early assumptions shaped the investigation, how later evidence reframed it, how confirmation bias lurked in unexpected places. Students listen, captivated, unsettled. They enter the field believing in answers. This case teaches them to respect questions. Documentarians return periodically, cameras lighter now, tone more reflective. They frame the story not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a meditation on absence, on the way communities metabolize trauma over time. Interviews are slower. Silences are left intact. The cold case, once defined by urgency, is now defined by endurance. And through it all, the central mystery remains untouched. What happened in those critical hours? Where the missing answers went? Whether the truth is known by someone still living, or whether it vanished with the moment itself. The questions do not fade. They simply lose their sharpest edges, becoming part of the landscape. On one particular evening, long after most have stopped paying attention, a former witness sits alone with memories that no longer feel distant. He has carried them quietly for years, unsure of their value, unsure of their accuracy. He wonders, not for the first time, whether silence was the right choice. The thought lingers unresolved like so much else connected to the case. This is how cold cases persist. Not through headlines, but through people. Through moments of doubt. Through the slow accumulation of what-ifs. They live in the spaces between official conclusions and personal belief, between what can be proven and what is felt. The Florida cold case no longer dominates the news cycle, but it has not disappeared. It has settled into the collective consciousness, a reminder that some stories resist closure not out of spite, but out of complexity. That truth is not always a single destination, but a series of approximations, each one closer, yet never complete. And so the narrative continues not with answers, but with echoes. With the understanding that mystery does not end when attention fades. It waits. It endures. It remains, quietly, patiently, in the background of everyday life, ready to resurface when least expected. A testament to the enduring power of unanswered questions and the human need to keep listening for something more, even in the silence. Time stretches the story thinner, but it never breaks it. Years after the last formal motion, after the final ruling has been filed and forgotten by most, the Florida cold case slips into a new phase, one without headlines or deadlines, one governed entirely by memory and quiet obsession. This is where unresolved crimes often live the longest, not in courtrooms or archives, but in the private rituals of those who refuse to let them dissolve into trivia. A former crime scene analyst keeps a photocopy of one photograph folded inside a notebook she carries everywhere. It is not graphic. It shows almost nothing at first glance. A patch of ground, uneven, disturbed, the kind of image thousands of times replicated across decades of investigations. But she remembers the heat that day, the way the insects fell silent when the tape went up, the subtle wrongness she felt even before she could articulate why. She studies the photo sometimes, knowing it will never yield anything new, yet unable to discard it. It represents a moment when the truth felt close enough to touch, before it slipped away again. Across the state, a journalist revisits the case late at night, scrolling through transcripts and timelines illuminated by the cold glow of a laptop screen. He has covered hundreds of stories since, most of them cleaner, easier to package. None have lingered like this one. He rewrites the opening paragraph of an unpublished piece for the 10th time, searching for language that can hold uncertainty without exploiting it. He knows the audience has moved on. He writes anyway, compelled less by exposure than by the need to honor complexity. The town itself bears subtle scars, not obvious ones. No memorials or plaques mark the sites most closely tied to the mystery. Instead, there are pauses, hesitations in conversation, an instinctive lowering of voices when certain names surface. Longtime residents still remember where they were when the news first broke, how ordinary the day had been before everything shifted. Newcomers sense something beneath the surface, a shared history they have not been invited into. For the family, the years have taught endurance more than healing. Grief has become less acute, but no less present. It manifests in unexpected ways. A song avoided, a road never taken, a birthday marked quietly, away from crowds. They have learned to live with parallel realities, one where life moves forward as it must, and another where time froze permanently at the moment everything changed. They speak to fewer reporters now. They have said most of what can be said. Still, they hold onto one belief with unwavering clarity, that the truth exists, whether or not it is ever acknowledged. This conviction does not bring peace. It brings steadiness, a foundation strong enough to stand on when speculation swirls and certainty remains out of reach. Occasionally, law enforcement revisits the file, prompted by nothing more than a feeling, a pattern recognized in another case, a technique newly validated, a name resurfacing unexpectedly in an unrelated investigation. Each time, hope flickers, cautious and restrained. The process is familiar now. Review, cross-check, verify, and, more often than not, conclude that the door remains closed. Yet even these moments matter. They affirm that the case has not been abandoned, only paused. In the world of cold cases, that distinction is everything. The suspect's life continues in a narrower orbit. Friends drift away. Opportunities evaporate quietly. He becomes careful with words, with routines, with the stories he tells about himself. He understands that the absence of a definitive ending leaves room for suspicion to thrive indefinitely. Whether innocent or guilty in the eyes of others, he exists in a permanent state of explanation, always aware that silence can be interpreted as admission and speech as manipulation. He sometimes revisits places connected to the early days of the investigation, standing at a distance unrecognized. He watches people pass through, unaware of the history beneath their feet. These moments bring no relief. They only reinforce the sense that the past is not behind him, but layered beneath the present, accessible at any moment to anyone willing to dig. In academic circles, the case begins to appear in discussions about narrative bias and investigative momentum. Experts dissect how early assumptions shaped later decisions, how pressure for resolution can obscure alternative interpretations. The Florida cold case becomes a reference point, cited not for what it solved, but for what it revealed about the systems designed to solve crimes. Its value shifts from outcome to insight. Students listen, intrigued and unsettled. They ask the questions everyone asks at first. Why didn't they find more? Why didn't someone talk sooner? Why didn't technology fix it? Their instructors answer carefully, emphasizing that reality rarely conforms to expectation, that truth is often fragmented, conditional, resistant. The case becomes a cautionary tale, not of failure, but of limitation. Late one night, a former witness sits alone, replaying memories that have grown heavier with time. At first, he dismissed them as irrelevant, then as unreliable. Now he is no longer sure. Details he once overlooked feel sharper, more defined. A sound, a movement, a moment that did not fit. He debates whether to speak, knowing that memory is a fragile thing, shaped as much by repetition as by fact. He wonders whether coming forward now would clarify the story or only complicate it further. This is the quiet torment of unresolved cases. They demand nothing, yet they exert constant